everybody. Today what we are going to do is we are going to have a mini lesson on persuasive technique in just a couple seconds. After you finish the mini lesson, after you finish this video, you have work time either to complete a peer review or to revise your position essay. Remember that is due on Tuesday night by 11:59 p.m. This week, don't forget about literacy snaps. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a collaborative FRQ, and then hopefully you have done a peer review and you are close to finishing your position essay. So for starters, what we're going to do is I'm going to go to Schoology, and while I'm doing that, I want you to restate what are the two things you can do after this mini lesson, after this video. 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So this persuasive technique is basically everything that we look for when we look at rhetorical analysis. When the different strategies that we're looking for, the different things that make a writer persuasive, that help show us their point, their message, that help support their purpose and lead us towards their purpose. Those are all strategies that we can put in our own writing. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to take the position essay sample. It's attached to the peer review assignment from this week in the virtual folder. And as I'm reading, I want you to be paying attention. Swikla and I found about 9 or 10 different techniques, different strategies, and that were intentionally used when we read through this sample essay. So the goal is to see how many you can find. Okay, you can be writing them down on a sticky note, on a piece of scratch paper. You can have a split screen open and be writing them out or annotating the essay as you go. I am not going to tell you where they are. You just need to see how many you can find yourself, and at the end of it I will go through and share some examples of some and some of the different techniques. Words. Okay. So real quick, pause. Summarize with your shoulder partner, turn and talk. If you're watching it by yourself, just say it out loud. What are you looking for? What are you looking for, and what's the purpose of a persuasive technique in a piece of writing? And 3, 2, 1. Okay, again, I'm going to read it out loud, writing down, having a split screen open. Basically, as I'm reading, what are some examples that you're finding? And this is just so we don't have to stop and start. Or I don't have to have you stop and start the video. Here's our sample. Empathy is an ocean, wide and precious. We marvel in it, soak in it, sit in awe of it. A sea of infinite wonder and admiration. Simultaneously, however, we toss garbage into that open field, letting it sink and collect at the bottom. Regardless, we are still drawn to it, captivated by it, even knowing that 88% of it, according to a recent study, is pollution and trash. That's empathy. Collectively, we all respect the beauty of empathy, that inclination to really understand one another with an open heart. We marvel in it, soak in it, sit in awe of it. We look at empathy with that same wonder and that same admiration, knowing its pure goodness and value. But we also know that amidst that sea of empathy, there's a fair amount of trash. Maybe not 88% of our shared empathy, but enough that we all listen with a cautious ear. Because empathy is often empty, just swells of good intentions. This empathy that we do nothing with is the trash sinking to the ocean floor. It's this empty empathy that stalls progress, that keeps us stagnant. We can have all the best intentions in the world, but we can't transform those ideas into actions. But if we can't transform those ideas into actions, nothing moves forward, unless you go further. A dolphin can jump 15 feet out of the water. A polar bear swims for hours, fleeing the destruction of their habitat, but ultimately pulls itself from the water and finds new life. I mean, hell, even the Little Mermaid had to go ask Ursula for legs. To create more than another ripple in the vastness of empathy, it takes sacrifice. So pause really quick, scroll through, think back to what I just read. Do you recognize any persuasive techniques? Do you notice any strategies that if you were doing a rhetorical analysis FRQ, you would be pulling out? Okay, turn and talk, list them out, annotate them. The benefit of having it annotated is that you would have a sample marked up so you could see what are some of the different techniques, what some of the different techniques look like. Okay. Oh, and I split just a little bit before section. 3, 2, 1. Empathy is the tide that lifts us, but sacrifice is the action that saves us. When empathy and sacrifice come together to produce courageous actions, progress ultimately succeeds. But if it was easy, well, we wouldn't be watching dolphin shows at SeaWorld, would we? That's something marvelous in sacrifice and the challenge. Even if the dolphins make it look easy. The marriage of sacrifice and empathy creates action, but those actions also take courage. Maya Angelou summarized it best. We all have empathy. We may not have enough courage to display it. Empathy is there in mass quantities, but the courage of sacrifice is the only way to create actual progress. Okay, pause real quick. We have about 10 seconds or so. Do you notice any rhetorical strategies? I'm not entirely sure if pausing after just a couple paragraphs will work. Okay. So how do we live courageously? How do we break the crest of the water to leap higher? We sacrifice. Sacrifice our ego for the greater good. Sacrifice a little security for the security of others. Sacrifice our own comfort to face our fears and misconceptions. Or we stand up to those we call friends. We all know that politicians drain empty empathy into that sea every day, making promises to their constituents, to the American people. Too often, however, it ends there, polluting the waters. Like so many others, they don't break the surface, and instead just follow the current. But on July 28, 2018, the late Senator John McCain famously voted no on the repeal of Obamacare, outright defying the expectations of his party. Leaping from the water, facing the current, he acted out of empathy, having heard the pleas of those in Arizona and across the country. With the sacrifice of his reputation and political capital, the senator brought action to empathy, giving hope to millions of Americans reliant on Obamacare. In other words, he lived courageously. We also live with courage when we seek out empathy. From investigative journalists who go undercover to researchers who go out into the unknown corners of the world, seeking out empathy also requires sacrifice. Barbara Ehrenreich, I don't know if I spelled that right, author of Nickel and Dimed, explored poverty by seeing if she could survive on minimum wage. Nellie Bly checked herself into an insane asylum to reveal the horrific conditions. Both women sacrificed their time, relationships, and even sanity to seek out knowledge and gain empathy for people outside their pond. This combination of sacrifice and empathy motivates reform and secures hope that change will happen. Between increases to minimum wage and the vast improvements to mental health care, these courageous actions catalyze progress. So take about 10-15 seconds, go through the section on courage. What are some strategies you see? Five, 4, 3, 2. Finishing up here. Frankly, empathy is useless without the sacrifice and courage. As I sit in my classroom thinking about the fears that plague my kids, I desperately want progress, and for them, hope. With each instance of mass violence in schools, that hope diminishes a little more. I'll put it plainly. We need this pairing, sacrifice and empathy, to save lives. Now. In 2018, 387 people were killed in acts of mass violence, 113 of those in schools. But for every successful limitation on gun ownership, other gun rights were expanded. Somehow we continue to spin our wheels, or sink in that sea of empty empathy, while more and more Americans are killed. We are empathetic. I know that. Our hearts ache with each disaster, are doubly wounded by the loss of young lives. The empathy is obvious with every outpour of images, memorials, and new reports. But who's going to take the leap? Are we willing to sacrifice to make change? What are we willing to sacrifice to make change? I'll start with the obvious. Guns. I'm the daughter of a hunter, and despite being traumatized at the sight of skinned deer hanging in the garage each fall, I understand and appreciate the tradition. I can think of no one who values life, even that of a deer, more than my father and the many other hunters that have influenced my life. When I speak of sacrifice, I don't mean theirs. I can also, though less enthusiastically, concede the need for personal safety. Everyone should feel safe in their home, and if that requires the discreet handgun, which is securely locked up, I can grant that. Responsible gun owners who make their kids take gun safety and have lockboxes and safes to keep weapons from falling into the wrong hands. When I speak of sacrifice, I don't mean theirs. But we have to concede somewhere, right? Progress will not happen without sacrificing courage. Will it be the NRA, sacrificing staunch traditions and the money of their many contributors to allow the eradication of automatic weapons? Or will it be Congress, sacrificing bipartisan bitterness and lobbyist loyalties to create real gun reform legislation? Or will it be gun collectors, sacrificing pieces of their treasured arsenals to give up unnecessary firepower? Somewhere, someone needs to sacrifice, to ride that tide of empathy and push further, to turn empathy and sacrifice into courageous actions, to save lives. Until then, our good intentions literally ocean floor. So I'm going to zoom out real quick. In this last page, what are some of the different strategies that you see? That you either saw or that you heard? Hopefully you're writing things down or turning and talking. And finishing up this persuasive technique, here are some persuasive techniques that were in this essay of Swickla's. There's the extended metaphor of the sea, of the ocean, coming back to that idea of litter throughout the ocean, throughout the floor, throughout our lives. Syntax is another thing. None of the sentences really start the same. There's not really like a repetition. There's a lot of variety in how they start, how long they are, what types of sentences they are. Simple sentences, complex sentences, using different forms of punctuation, semicolons, dashes, that kind of thing. It's a very conversational tone. And the most obvious example that I can think of is like, well, I mean, hell, even Little Mermaid had to ask for legs, which is not to say that swearing automatically makes it conversational. It's just, this is the example that did it. There's a lot of rhetorical questions. One section that comes to mind is the last section with is it going to be the NRA? Is it going to be Congress? Is it going to be the collectors? The formatting, it does not look like an academic essay, even if it does have a somewhat formal conversational tone. Sometimes they're single lines, sometimes they're a couple sentences, but you play around with the length, the style of the paragraphs. It doesn't have to look like an FRQ. Those single lines can emphasize important lines, or the short paragraphs can help increase the pace. It is visual cues for the reader. It's first person. There's personal pronouns. There's the we, the collective we at the beginning. There's the I of being a hunter's daughter. There's imagery of littering the sea floor, of, that's probably the most obvious one, which is helping with the metaphor. But there's a lot of imagery that kind of helps visualize a lot of the different things. Concessions. Like I can concede this point that this isn't the sacrifice that I'm talking about. This isn't the sacrifice that I'm talking about. And parallelism. In the first section, we have like we strive, something, we aim for it. So all of these are different techniques that happen to be in this essay. So the big thing for you moving forward as you're working on finalizing and polishing your essay is that the persuasive techniques, this is the perfect opportunity to practice incorporating those persuasive techniques into your writing. There isn't going to be it's not going to hurt your grade or hurt your essay if you try to have persuasive techniques. In fact, if you're consistently trying, and I can see as I'm reading that you're consistently trying to incorporate persuasive techniques into your writing, that's a 91%. So even just trying and experimenting is going to benefit you. The difference between proficiency and mastery in this case is that proficiency is you're trying it consistently, but mastery is you are consistently succeeding at incorporating those techniques, that they are persuasive, that they are I lost my train of thought, that they are working, that they're not just there and you're trying them, but that they're succeeding. Okay, so the only way that you wouldn't get that proficiency or higher is if you don't consistently try different things, different techniques in your writing. So for the rest of the class period, you have time to do a peer review, you have time to polish and work on your position essay. Don't forget that it's due tomorrow on Tuesday. Well, if you're watching it this year, it's tomorrow. Okay. You can ask Swikla or you can message me if you have any specific questions.